Okay, to assemble the yoke front and back pieces together, I want you to lay out those three pieces. You have one yoke front and two yoke back pieces. Your yoke front piece is laid out with the right side facing up, and the same thing with your back pieces. So what you're going to do is take one of your back pieces. This is the center back for your back yoke piece. And of course, this is the side. Your side has a notch cut in it, and your side front has a notch cut in it. So that's how you're going to know which sides or which edges to line up with each other. So this is the right side. So we need to take this piece, place the right side together, lining up your notches, and then we're going to pin. So you can pin one on the edge or at the bottom, and then one at the other end. If you must, you can place a pin here in the center where the notch is. Okay? Then we're going to do the same thing with the other piece. Take the right side, place it on top of the front yoke, make sure your notches are lined up, and go ahead and pin. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to go to your sewing machine, and I want you to sew a 5/8 inch seam on both sides. After you sew your 5/8 inch seam, I want you to go to the ironing board, press the seams flat on both sides, then press your seams open and flat. Now remember, you have one more yoke front piece and two more back yoke pieces. So after you do one, do the same thing to the other pieces. Now that we have our yoke pieces sewn together, we're going to create a guideline for inserting the zipper. So you'll see here on the edge of my yoke, on the back yoke, I have folded over a piece, and then this is going to be our guideline for placing the zipper. And I want to show you a method to do that. Now remember when we basted our skirt top, the center back seam, we stitched that seam, and at the top I had you to baste for a little bit to create a guideline for folding over your edge for the zipper. This time I'm going to show you a method of doing that with your seam gauge. So what you're going to do is place your seam gauge at the 5/8 inch line. Then you're going to fold over the fabric. We're looking at the wrong side of the yoke. So you're going to fold over, then take your seam gauge and lay it right there on the fabric. Now the edge of the slider should be on the fold, and then the edge of your seam gauge should be right at the edge of that fabric. So go ahead and manipulate your fabric, move it around until you get that measurement. Okay, and once you have that measurement, go down a little bit, make sure you get the same measurement. You're going to go ahead and press that. So get your press cloth, place it on top, and with the tip of your iron, just press down. And before moving forward, go ahead and measure again to make sure you're getting the same measurement from the top, from one edge to the other, down a little bit. And we're going to press. Moving your fingers so that you don't get any steam burns. And now we have a fold on both edges of the yoke. So you're going to go ahead and do the same thing to your other yoke piece. Then we're going to go to the sewing machine and attach the yoke to the top of the skirt. All right, now what you're looking at is your skirt front with the right side facing out and one of your yoke pieces. And this yoke is constructed of the yoke front and the two yoke backs sewn together. And you should have two of these. And the reason you have two is because one is going to be the front of, will show on the outside of your skirt, and then the other piece is going to be a facing for the inside of your skirt. So go ahead and take your yoke piece, lay it on top of your fabric with the right sides facing each other. You have these two notches on your yoke, and you have the two notches on your skirt. So what you're going to do is line up those notches and pin. Line up the other notch and pin. From there, you're going to go to the side seam of your yoke and the side seam of your skirt. Line up those seams and pin. And you're going to pin through all the thicknesses because you remember you have your pocket on your skirt. So pin through that. And do the same thing on the other side. Match up the side seams and pin. I want to bring your attention to something. You see this? My ends aren't even. Don't panic if that happens to you. It's okay. What you will do is take your fabric scissors and just turn it over, or whichever side is uneven. You're going to cut from the shorter side to the long side, and we're just going to even that out. So all you're going to do is take your scissor and just even it out, and it's not going to hurt anything to do that. Then you will go back and pin the edges. Okay, now from there you will go ahead and pin the ends, opening out the fold on your yoke and opening out the fold on your skirt, and just press or pin those edges together. And remember, you have your notches here to guide you also. Do that on the other side. And I'm having you to pin together the key areas first, and then we will go ahead and fit in the rest of the areas as we pin. Now, going back to the center front of the skirt, check to see if your fabric, if the two pieces fit evenly. If they do, perfect. Go ahead and pin. In all the areas, if they fit together, go ahead and pin. Okay? If your fabric happens to not fit, if your skirt piece is bigger than your yoke piece, then that's why we put this ease stitch in here. So what you would do in that case is go to where you started the ease stitch, find that thread, and once you find the thread, you're going to pull it. Pull the thread. Oh, that's the wrong one. Pull the thread, and what's happening is the skirt is gathering on the skirt part. Okay, so you're just gonna even out those little gathers until your skirt fits your yoke. Now mine already fits, so that's why my yoke is looking larger as I gather the skirt. So if your skirt is larger than the yoke when you're pinning it together, find that basting, the E-stitch thread, and go ahead and pull it and make it fit into that area. Now if you happen to have already cut off your basting stitches, the threads, go ahead and look at your skirt and find a thread and just snip it, and then go ahead and pull from there. Start past the area where you need to shorten your skirt weight, the top of your skirt. Okay, so go ahead and continue pinning around the top of your skirt, and then we'll come back here and we'll sew the yoke onto the skirt. To attach the yoke to the skirt, we're going to check our settings first, our machine settings. Now, if you're sewing with a knit fabric, I want you to change your stitch selector to a zigzag stitch. And we're going to sew a narrow zigzag stitch. So your stitch width, change that to a 1. If you're sewing with a woven fabric, then keep your stitch at a straight stitch and stay between 2 and 3. I'm sorry, for your stitch, yes, your stitch width between 2 and 3. Okay? Now, the next thing before we start sewing, I want you to check your bobbin thread. So go ahead and remove the bobbin cover, pull out your bobbin and see if you have enough thread on there. I don't have enough thread on my bobbin. I would run out of thread before I get even halfway through the sewing. So if your thread is low, you will go ahead and wind another bobbin and then come back and meet me at the sewing machine. Okay, I've changed my bobbin. I have a full bobbin now. So let's go ahead and insert the fabric under your presser foot at the 5/8 inch line. Lower your needle, presser foot, and we're going to sew from one end of the skirt top to the other end, staying on that 5/8 inch line. Back stitch. As you're sewing, you will be sewing on a curve, so go ahead and manipulate the fabric as you sew, making sure you're not pulling or pushing. Allow the feed dog to feed your fabric, and you just manipulate the fabric along the way. Now, when you come to a side seam, that's where your pocket is. You want to make sure, take your hand and pass it under your fabric, making sure that that pocket is laying flat and that all of the other layers are flat. You will be sewing through 4 layers of fabric here. Remove your pin. So just make sure that everything is flat. Continue sewing. Always double check to make sure your edges are even. And we're coming up on the other pocket piece, so make sure you pass your hand under, make sure it's flat, especially on the edge where the pocket starts, so that you're not sewing in folds. If you did that, you would have to take it apart and redo that area. If this happens, take a look. If when you're sewing and you get to a seam allowance and it starts to bunch up, what you will do is lift your presser foot, flatten it out with your finger, and lower your presser foot again. And then continue sewing. Make sure you're keeping the bulk of your fabric on the left side on top of your table. We're going to continue to the end and then do a back stitch. Remove it. Now we're going to go back to the beginning where we started, and you're going to do the same thing again. However, this time you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. So go ahead and line up your fabric with the 1/4 inch seam line. Do your back stitch and sew from the beginning to the end, being careful to make sure that the pieces are flat when you get to the 4 layers where the pocket is. Pass your hand under, although it's already sewn down, so you probably won't be sewing in a fold, but just double check as you go. So go ahead and fold that seam in, and then we'll meet back here and I'll tell you what the next step is. Now we are looking at our skirt from the back with the right side out, and we've attached our yoke with a 5/8 inch seam and a 1/4 inch seam. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go and trim off the seam allowance. Get your fabric scissors and just trim about half of that seam allowance away. And then you're just going to continue all the way around to the other end, and then I want you to go ahead and meet me at the ironing station, and we're going to iron our yoke, and I'm going to teach you another technique. Now we're ready to press our pattern yoke, but before we do that, let's take a look at our pattern instruction sheet to find out where we are. In step number 6, we assembled the yoke front and back pieces together. Then in step number 7, we attached the yoke to the skirt. In step number 8, we're installing our zipper, but we won't be following the pattern instruction guide because we're installing an invisible zipper. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's press our yoke seam. Okay, I have my skirt on the ironing board with the back side with the opening facing up, and we're looking at the wrong side of the fabric. Now, when we press the seam, we're going to press the seam toward the yoke. So you're going to iron with the yoke going in that direction. So I'm going to turn it. Actually, I'm going to go this direction. And when you start this press, I want you to make sure you're not pressing this line flat because we need that guideline for installing our zipper. So just start just past that guideline. Grab your pressing cloth, place it right on top of your seam, and then press, remembering not to go on top of that line. Turn your skirt, making sure that your pocket is flat. Straighten out your pocket. And then the last part, making sure again that you do not press out this line. Just to that line. Then you're going to turn your skirt right side out, put it on your ironing board. Oh, the other way. And we're going to do the same thing on the right side of the fabric. Go around and press flat, and then I'll meet you at the sewing machine. To install our zipper, we're going to be using a zipper foot. Now, your machine should have come with a regular zipper foot. It may or may not have come with an invisible zipper foot, but it's okay if it didn't because we're going to be using a regular zipper foot. I'm teaching you to install an invisible zipper, but I'm going to teach you how to do it with a regular foot for those of you who don't have the invisible zipper foot. If you do have the invisible zipper foot, it's wonderful for installing your zippers, and it makes that technique a lot easier. So if you don't have one, I would suggest going ahead and getting an invisible zipper foot so that you can install your zippers easier and faster. Okay, now with your regular zipper foot, this is what mine looks like. Yours may vary depending on the type of machine that you have, but you have a left side and a right side. So when we're installing our zipper, we're going to be using both sides of the zipper foot. Okay, and then just to show you what the difference is for an invisible zipper foot, when you turn it over to the back, it has these two grooves for sewing the left and right side of your zipper. And when we install or place this on top of the zipper, the teeth just sink right into there for a perfect line of stitching. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to use your regular zipper foot to install the zipper. To install your zipper foot, just go ahead and push the right side into that groove, or however yours attaches. You're going to be sewing on the right side of the zipper foot, and the edge of your zipper will slide along the edge of the zipper foot. Before we pin our zipper, I need to let you guys know that there was an audio glitch in my video and I had to redo this segment. So what you will see me working on is a back portion of the skirt only, because I had to go ahead and cut out another piece so that you guys can actually see, and I want you to hear what I'm saying to install this zipper. So you're going to continue as you have been doing. This won't affect you at all, but I just wanted to let you know that, because when I start to pin the zipper, you'll see that the front part of the skirt is not attached. So let's go ahead and start pinning the zipper to the back of the garment. Take your zipper first. This is what we have. This is the back of the skirt, and our back edges are folded, or pressed and folded open or over to the side. All right, so you're going to take your zipper with the right sides and place it down onto the edges. And I just want you to see what we're going to be doing. We're going to be sewing this zipper tape on to the edge of the fold. So we're going to be opening it out. We're going to open it out, and you will see the fold that we pressed in. And the edge of our zipper is going to be placed right on that fold. Okay, and then we're going to sew it down. But before we do that, we need to measure and place a few marks onto both the fabric and the zipper tape. So I want you to grab your marking pen or pencil or both, and take your seam gauge. Slide your slider to the 5/8 inch mark, and then I want you to go to the top edge of your skirt and measure with the slider at the top edge 5/8 of an inch, and then make a mark right there on the edge of your fabric, and do the same thing to the other side. Okay, that is going to be our sewing guide for attaching the yoke. For attaching the zipper tape. But when we get ready to sew on the yoke, we'll know that's where we're placing it. Now, you're going to open it out this side, and you're going to take your zipper tape and place it face down. Now, looking at your zipper tape on the right side, there's a plastic stop right there to keep your zipper from going off, to keep your zipper pull from going off the tape. So the top of that stop is where you're going to place, or what you're going to place right at that dot. So the top of that plastic stop is going right onto that dot. Okay? Let me demonstrate that again. So, with your skirt face down, your zipper face down, take the skirt, turn it over, take your zipper and place it right on top. Place the plastic stop right at that dot. And then we're going to pin down. So with your first, if you want to, you can pin perpendicular to your zipper or to your fold. I like to pin parallel, but I will start the first one perpendicular to that fold. And then the rest, I'm going to pin parallel to the fold. So the next one, and as you're pinning, make sure that the edge of your zipper is right on that line. Okay. And you want to make sure that the ball of your pin is facing down, because as you're sewing, as your needle is going this way, you're going to need to pull your pins out toward you. So make sure the ball of the pin is facing the bottom of the skirt. So continue pinning, placing the edge of the zipper, the teeth, on that fold. And when you get to that seam where the yoke and the skirt meet, make sure you pin through that to hold it down. So when I come back up, I'm pinning through that seam allowance to hold it down. And continue down. And then if you'd like, or I suggest, go ahead and go down one more. Although you're not going to be sewing past this zipper pull, we can still put a pin in there just to keep it in place. Now, this is what you have. I want you to go and take the tips of each pin and insert them into the fabric. And don't get too close to the teeth. You don't want to distort that placement on the fold. And the reason we do that is because as you're sewing and you're pulling the pins out, you don't want to stick yourself with the tips of the pin that are below. Okay, so that side is folded, or I'm pinned. Then you're going to go ahead and insert your fabric under the zipper foot. And you want to place the edge of the zipper foot with the edge of your zipper tape. And just lower your presser foot. But before we lower the needle, what's going to happen is your needle is going to need to be as close to this edge as possible without sewing through your zipper teeth on the other side. So there's a groove here in this section on the edge of the tape. There's a groove. If you take your finger and press on it, you can feel it. And that's where you want to sew. If you go any further to the right, you'll be sewing onto your zipper tape. If you go much further to the left, then it won't look like an invisible zipper when you zip it up. So, filling that groove, go ahead and lower your needle and look to see where it falls. If it's not falling in this area, then lift it and move your fabric over to the right, or I'm sorry, yes, your fabric over to the right. The presser foot is still on the edge. Lower your needle, and I still need to move over a little bit more. And I think that's the groove. That's the groove. So make sure you find that spot and make sure you're in there, not on your zipper teeth. Then we're going to sew slowly all the way down, making sure we're staying in the groove. And your focal point, your guideline, will be this edge wherever your zipper tape falls. So let's go ahead and slowly stitch. And as you come to your zippers or your pins, you can go ahead and pull those out. So back stitch. If I can find my petal. Lower my needle and stitch forward, staying in that groove on a straight line. Now you're coming up on this crosswise seam that you're going to be sewing over. Check under and make sure that's lying flat. Now we were supposed to pin on that, but just in case you didn't catch it, make sure it's lying flat before you sew through. and that the seam is toward your yoke. As you continue to sew, this zipper tape may want to curl over. When you see that starting to happen, just take your finger and make sure you're keeping it flat, because if it starts to fold over, then your needle will be pushed to the left and you won't be in that groove anymore. So as you're sewing, just make sure this is staying flat and your presser foot is on the edge. Now, we're coming close to the end here, and this zipper stop is not going to allow this foot to go past this zipper. So once you get to where you can't go any further, that's where you're going to backstitch. So let's do that. Mine has stopped, and I'm going to backstitch. Let's remove the fabric and snip our threads. Then we're going to turn it over and check it. And there you have it. Okay? We're going to do the same thing on the other side of the zipper, but before we do that, we need to go and mark the other side of the zipper where this seam is, so that we make sure that the two seams meet and that they're lined up properly when we zip up our zipper. So let's go do that. So go ahead and close up your zipper. And what you're going to do is, right here at the seam, you're going to make a mark on this side of the zipper tape. So go ahead and grab a marker, and right where that seam intersects, just make a mark on your zipper tape. Okay, open your zipper. Then take a straight pin, press it right through the center, or right through that mark. And then on the opposite side, go ahead and mark the edge right where that pin is. And that's going to help you line up your seam. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, the other side of the opening is here. Okay, so we have it attached to this side. Now we're going to attach it to this side. And the first pinning we're going to do is right here at this seam, because that's the most important area. We want to make sure it's lined up evenly so that our seams line up. So go ahead and pin using whichever method you choose. We now have the other side of the zipper tape pinned to the skirt, making sure that the line on the zipper tape is even with this seam. Also making sure that that plastic stop at the top of your zipper is right at that dot that we made. Okay, now we're going to sew this side of the zipper down, but first we need to switch sides on our presser foot. So just go ahead and switch it to the other side, and then place your fabric under. And this time we're lining up our zipper edge where the teeth are with the left edge of the zipper foot. So match that up, line it up, making sure that the edge of the zipper foot is on top of the edge of the zipper tape. And as you're sewing, if this tends to want to curl, press it down with your finger. Okay, so let's go ahead and position our needle. Now on your stitch selector, if you turn it, well mine, if I turn it to the left, I can change the position of my needle. So if I'm at a single stitch, I can turn that wheel, the dial, to the left, and it moves my needle over. If you have a digital machine, you should be able to change the position of your needle too, or whichever kind of machine you have. Check with your user's manual to see how to change the position. So I move mine over to the left, the needle to the left. So I'm going to move my needle over, or fabric over, just a little bit, and then I'm going to check the position, and it's a little too close to the teeth. Don't go through the teeth or you will not be able to close your zipper. So just position it, manipulate it until it's positioned properly. Okay, there we go. Back stitch, and then stitch forward. Making sure again that you're staying in the groove. And if you take your finger, you can feel the groove. So my groove is right here, so I'm going to make sure I stay right there. Make sure when you come to that seam that it's flat. And when you get down to the end here, just kind of straighten this out and make sure this is even with that, just to help you keep it straight as you sew to the end. And when you hit that zipper stop, that's when you stop and back stitch. Okay, let's remove our fabric. And the next part is the scary part. This is where you close your zipper and hope that everything is lined up in its proper place, because if not, we have to take it apart and do it all over again. And that is just, I promise you, I have prayed before that my zipper is lined up properly, because I did not want to redo it. So go ahead and turn your skirt right side out. Okay, and you're looking at the back. Now, what you see looks like it's all wrong. It looks like it's all twisted. It's not. When you fold this in and when you fold that in, what you do is take this and flip it inside the skirt, and it's just fine. When I saw that happen for the first time, I was like, oh no, I sewed it in twisted, but it's okay, just flip it in. Now go ahead and grab the zipper pull and zip. Yes, yes, there we go. You've got your nicely installed invisible zipper, and we're good. We have to go and close up this opening at the bottom of the zipper. So let me show you how to do that. Go ahead and turn your skirt inside out with the back, and if you lift your zipper, you'll notice there's the opening there, and that is done on purpose, because if we had closed it up, we wouldn't have been able to close our zipper. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this and we're going to close it up and sew from here to this area. Now what's difficult about this is you won't be able to meet that line exactly, because you have this zipper, the zipper teeth here, and it's pretty difficult to get it right on that line. So what's going to happen is we're going to sew from this stitch here up to this stitch, but we're going to be a little bit outside of that stitch, and that's okay, and I'll show you once we get it sewn together that it works. So go ahead and put your regular zip or presser foot back on your machine, and then we're going to sew this closed. Now, go ahead and take your zipper tape and pull it out of the way, and then grab this seam allowance here. And if you need to, go ahead and pin that. And I'm going to do that just so you can see. Pin it. And we're going to go ahead and sew from here to there. All right. Go ahead and change your machine settings. Your stitch selector should be a straight stitch. Your stitch length 2.5, and your stitch width somewhere between 2 and 3, wherever your setting is for your needle to be in the middle of the presser foot. Go ahead and lower your needle to where it's falling right into the previous stitching, your presser foot. Grab this and sandwich that zipper inside and move this one out of the way. Go ahead and back stitch and then stitch forward. Go very slow. Staying on the 5/8 inch seam line, and just follow until you reach this area, this other stitching. And then you're going to be sewing just to the left of this, as close as you can possibly get. And back stitch. Now let me show you what it looks like. Go ahead and snip your threads. And then if you open it up, you will see it is not a perfect stitch. It is not. Sometimes I can get it straighter, sometimes not. So if you go and open up your skirt, or turn your skirt over, I mean, you will see, let me turn it right side out first. But you will see this is the area where I closed it up. Okay, so it is closed. And then we're going to press that, and then we'll, after, you don't have to press it right now. You can wait until we do a final press. So let's just go ahead and attach our yoke facing. Okay, our zipper is installed, and now it's time to attach the yoke facing. So we're looking at the front of the skirt with the right side facing us. There's your zipper. And we're going to take this edge of the yoke this time and attach it to the top yoke that's on the skirt already. So we'll take this yoke, place it on top of the skirt with the right side facing down, so you have both right sides facing each other. And first you're going to pin the side seams together. So go ahead and line that up with the edges even and pin. Same thing on the other side. Pin. And you're going to go ahead and pin in between. Then going over to the edge, when you pin this edge, pin this on top of your zipper, on top of your zipper tape, right there. Same thing on the other side. Pin the top yoke on top of your zipper tape. All right, now we are ready to sew. If you feel you need to, you can place more pins in between the ones that I have placed. So we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew a 5/8 inch seam all the way around from one end to the next end. And we're going to be careful not to go past the top of our zipper tape, and that should be at the 5/8 inch mark because that's the measurement we took. So let's go to the sewing machine. Okay, we're looking at the front of our skirt. Our zipper is installed, and we have our other yoke piece, and this is our yoke facing. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach this edge of the yoke to the top of the yoke that's already installed. But before we do that, in the instructions, step number 13, let me make sure. Yes, step number 13 has us to finish off the bottom edge of this yoke piece. And the technique that they are suggesting is that you press up the seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch. So you would press that up all the way around, and then you will clip away 3/8 of an inch. What I'm going to do, and you can choose whichever method you want. I'm going to just use my pinking shears and cut this off. Now remember, I'm sewing with a knit fabric, so I don't really have to finish the edge, but I want the pretty. So I'm just going to use my pinking shear. I'm not going to stitch a straight seam and the pinking, just going to pink around here. You could do that, or if you have a serger, you can serge this edge, or if you'd like, you can do a zigzag stitch. So you choose whichever way you like to finish the edge. Go ahead and do that, and then come back here and we're going to attach this yoke to the other yoke. Now, we're on step number 14 on the pattern instruction sheet, and we're attaching the yoke facing. So we're going to pin the top, and I've already finished my edge with the pinking shears. We're going to start at the side seam and pin together, matching those seams up. Do the same thing on the other seam, matching them, making sure the edges are even. Then go over to the edge and take the facing, the yoke facing, and place it over the zipper tape, making sure that the edges are even and the top edges are even, and pin. Do the same thing on the other side. And then I'm going to place one more in the center front. You can place more pins if you need to. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to stitch a 5/8 inch seam from this edge to the other edge, making sure that we're not stitching over that plastic zipper stop that we marked. And that's where we marked the 5/8 inch. So let's go ahead and stitch. Back stitch and stitch forward with a 5/8 inch seam. Make sure that your settings are right. Straight stitch, 2.5 inch length, and between 2 and 3 for your width to make that needle even with the middle of the presser foot. Keeping your edges even. When you get to that seam, check on the bottom to make sure the bottom seam is laying flat, that it's open. And again, you're sewing on a curve, so manipulate the fabric as you go around with your hands. Check that seam before pressing. Make sure it's flat. And when we get to the edge, we're going to back stitch. And there we have attached the yoke. Now what we're going to do is we're going to trim this seam allowance about 1/4 inch away, and then we're going to do a technique called understitch. So go ahead and trim the seam and come back here. I have trimmed away my seam allowance, and now we're going to understitch. So open out your yoke and place your skirt on your machine with the yoke facing to the right side of your machine. And we're going to go ahead and place this seam allowance under your needle, under your presser foot, right on the edge. Now, if you will look at the positioning of my needle, this line of stitching is right here on the inside edge of my presser foot. So that's what I'm going to use as my guideline. Wherever your guideline is, you want to make sure that the center of your presser foot is lined up with the center of that seam allowance. And then find a focal point. I can follow this or I can follow this. Let me repeat that. I can follow this stitching line on the inside, the left inside of my presser foot, or I can follow this edge of my seam allowance on the inside to the right of the presser foot. So you choose your focal point and you're going to sew from one end to the other, making sure that you're keeping this flat. And as you're sewing, you can push your finger over to make sure it's not getting bunched up. So let's go ahead and do that. Lower your needle, back stitch, and then stitch. And just take your time on this because you really need to make sure that that seam allowance is staying flat and that it's the needle is catching the middle. Now, as you come up on this cross seam here, it gets bulky in this area. So what I tend to do as I come upon it is I press down to hold it down to make sure that presser foot goes over it and that it doesn't get caught up under here. So let's do that. So pressing down, and if it does, see how it got caught in there? If it does, don't panic. Just lift your presser foot as high as it will go and flatten it out, and then you can continue sewing. You have to really manipulate the fabric in that area. We're coming up on that seam allowance again with the extra thickness. Then backstitch. And you're done. We're going to flip it over. And when you turn this to the inside, that stitching, the understitching, gives us almost like a hard edge, making it easier for us to fold over, and it prevents this facing from turning outside to the front of your garment. So when you're wearing it, this is all you're going to see. Now we have our yoke facing attached to the yoke of the skirt. Our next step in step number 15, we have to attach the yoke facing to the zipper tape. And we are going to use a slip stitch to do that. Now, I don't particularly enjoy doing any stitching by hand, but I want to teach you this. So what I want you to do is turn your skirt right side out. And then on one side of your yoke facing, go ahead and fold over the fold that we pressed in, and then you're going to fold this over your yoke facing so that it's laying on top of your zipper tape. Okay, so using that stitching as a guide, just fold it over, let it fold over naturally, and then you're going to take a pin and just place it here just to hold it in place. Okay, not too close to the zipper teeth. Pin just to hold it in place all the way to the end. Now, to stitch or to do a slip stitch, you're going to need a hand needle and some thread. I'm using white thread, as I have been using throughout our project, so that you can see the stitches. You will use a coordinating color for your fabric. Now, first go ahead and put a knot. Your thread, when you thread it through the needle, it's doubled. Go ahead and pull one side longer, and then just put a little slip knot at the end. Okay, then you're going to take your needle and, starting at the bottom, slip the needle in between the opening of that fold and go through and come out about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, then go down into the zipper tape, pull up a few threads, go back through the fold of the fabric, go over about 1/4 of an inch, back down through your zipper tape, pull up a few threads, and you're going to continue doing this all the way to the end. And when you get to the end, you're going to end it off the same way you started. You're going to go down into your fabric. Actually, let me just take this stitch. Whenever you pull a knot, just go ahead and pull that thread loose. Find it and pull the knot out. Insert it right back through the fold, come out, whenever you get it knotted, just go ahead and straighten it out, pull it out. And then to end it, go ahead and go through the zipper tape and just tie a knot. Hold that down onto the zipper tape and pull. Okay, and you're going to do that when you get to the end, or if you happen to run out of thread, then you'll end it that way, and then you'll rethread your needle and start over and go all the way to the end. Now I want you to do this on both sides, and then we're going to sew this part down, your facing, to the front or onto this seam, so that this is not just flopping when you're wearing your skirt. We are almost done. We have 2 steps left to complete our skirt. We're going to sew down the yoke facing to the skirt, and we're going to hem the skirt. First, for the yoke facing, we're going to use a technique called stitching in the ditch. Now, the pattern instructions don't tell us to do this. This is an extra step I'm including so that this yoke is not moving around while you're wearing your skirt. So to stitch in the ditch, what we will be doing at the sewing machine is stitching right in between this seam, and that's going to hold down this yoke facing to the inside of the skirt. So first, let's pin the yoke facing. The skirt, I'm looking at the wrong side of the back of the skirt, and I'm going to fold out this side so that I'm looking at the right side of the skirt. We're going to insert our pins to the right of the seam and insert them perpendicular or parallel to that seam, because we don't want to sew over the pins. So make sure your fabric is flat. Go ahead and pin. Each time you're turning your fabric to go to pin the next section, you want to make sure that it's flat, because you want to make sure you feel that you're catching in that yoke, and you can go ahead and check to see where that seam is, and if it's right on the edge, you just want to be careful that you're catching that edge in when we're sewing at the machine. Pin. Making sure that the wrong side of the yoke is not turned over to the front. That edge needs to be just like that on the top. Okay? So be careful that you're manipulating your fabric to where everything is in its proper place. So make sure that's flat, your edge is straight, and pin. Checking on the back side to make sure you're past the seam line so that you're catching the fabric in. So go ahead and continue pinning all the way to the other side, and then we'll meet at the sewing machine. Okay, go ahead and line up your seam with the middle of your needle, the middle of the presser foot. Okay, lower your needle to make sure it's going to go right in that seam. If it's not, adjust your fabric until you get it to the place where it's going right into the center of that seam. Okay? Go ahead and lower your needle. The presser foot should be down. And a back stitch. When you back stitch, make sure you stop before you get to the zipper teeth, because if you sew over the zipper teeth, you won't be able to close your zipper. So don't try to go to the edge of the fabric. Just get kind of close. Kind of close. And your needle is going right into the center. Now, this is the one time where you are focusing on this center point right here, the center of your zipper of your presser foot. You're not using a guide, because that needle needs to be going right in there. If you see threads on the front of your skirt, don't worry about those. Those are the basting stitches that we put in to create an ease stitch in the beginning, and we're going to be removing these during the cleanup stage. So just go ahead and sew. And again, you can't see my stitching. I'm not using a white thread this time because I'm going to wear this skirt. I'm using a coordinating color. So just make sure you're stitching right in the middle of that seam. Go ahead and do that all the way to the other end and back stitch.